Good evening. This is the Nevada Unified School District Board of Trustees meeting for November 2nd. We're convening at 6 in the evening, and the first order of business is a pledge allegiance. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 6, announcements of reportable actions in closed session. Vice President, would you like to report?
I'm sure. So for item 3B, with respect to every item of business to be discussed in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.1, conference with legal counsel, settlement of pending litigation. A majority of the board in closed session voted to approve a settlement agreement with the parent of student 10000058390 who asserted special education claims against the district. The board approved reimbursement for private placement and services up to $27,500 in exchange for releases and waiver of claim against the district. Trustee Butler made a motion to approve the settlement agreement stated above. Trustee Nell seconded the motion. I'd like to now do a roll call vote. Trustee Nell?
Aye.
Trustee Aguila?
Aye.
Trustee Jacobson? Aye. Trustee Butler?
Aye.
Trustee Mack?
Aye.
I'm an aye. And President Miller?
Aye.
The motion passes. For item 3C, with respect to every item of business to be discussed in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation. It was informational only. Item 3D, with respect to every item of business to be discussed in closed session, public employees discipline, dismissal, release, informational only. Item 3E, with respect to every item of business to be discussed in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957 and Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators, Barbara Frankovich, Interim Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, Employees Organization, Nevada Federation of Teachers, NFT, was informational only. Item 3F, with respect to every item of business to be discussed in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957 and Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators, Barbara Frankovich, Interim Assistant Superintendent, Human Resource Employee Organization, California State Employees Association, CSEA, was also information only. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next order of business, item number 7, is the approval of the order of business, the agenda for this evening's business. And it's been suggested that we take 13A and B and deal with them in the opposite order, same two items, but in the opposite order, as more convenient. So I need a motion to adopt the agenda with that change in order of business.
Mr. President, I'll move the adoption of the agenda, with the exception of moving item 13B will now be 13A, and 13A will be 13B.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Trustee Aguilar. All in favor? 7 in advisory vote. Danny, thank you very much. 7 in favor and 1 advisory vote. Thank you very much. Public comment on the consent agenda. We are going to consider the consent agenda. Do we have any public comments on the consent agenda? Hearing none, we'll move past public, so I need a motion to consider the consent agenda, which is item 14's A through L, all the items. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda? Trustee Jacobson? Yes? Yes? Move, and a second by Trustee Aguilar. So all of the consent items are going to move forward. None have been pulled. All in favor of the consent agenda. Advisory vote yes. Thank you very much, Danny. And 7 trustees in favor, none opposed. So good. Announcements for board superintendent. This is item number 10. Announcements, board superintendent and student board members. Danny, do you want to lead us off on this so we can hear some great news?
Yeah, of course. So I'm also representing San Marin today. And so I'll start off with them first. They had their costume contest involving students and teachers, and that went pretty good. They collaborated with the Novato Mothers Club and for a Halloween trick-or-treat event on Saturday morning and had Mr. McLeod's bands play. They had candy, arts, and crafts, and different treats. And then they celebrated Red Ribbon Week with Red Wednesday and had posters all around campus. And then, so for Novato High, there's a long list, but so the Novato High School Library has been showcasing different books like crazy this whole semester. They did September, which was self-help books, and Hispanic Heritage Month and Spanish textbooks. October and November, they're showcasing fiction and nonfiction books by Native American authors, and this month there's a gratitude tree. Copperfields is also supporting Novato High School Library by donating 20% of its sales back to us on purchases between November 5th to the 7th. And then our college and career specialist, Miss Prettle, has been doing a great job coordinating college visits and is a good person for that. A lot of seniors are really appreciating her efforts in helping us. Cynthia, the Dreamers Club, and the DEI action team hosted a Dia de los Muertos informational session and encouraged students to decorate the Novato High School altar. And we now have a Spanish Instagram account for our EL students. And then the big band dance was a success outdoors, and congrats to MSA Dance and Jazz bands on this event. Lighting and the performances were amazing. Rock band performed at Sweetwater in October. There'll be a Hot Monk in November 17th. Homecoming week. We had our Spirit Week and parade originally on the 22nd for October, but due to the rain, we kind of set the dance back to the week after. But we still kept the parade that same week. And special thank you for the superintendent and the board of trustees for being in our parade. We love having you guys. The seniors won with 10 spirit points for our parade. So we basically had 2 spirit weeks. Our first Spirit Week we still went through, and our second Spirit Week we decided to include Red Ribbon Week. And so we did a bunch of days, and then we did Red Wednesday. The homecoming rally was really great, excuse me. We had sophomores step up their game and were almost as loud as juniors and seniors. And for the dance, we had made a survey for students to request different songs for a playlist so we can play it at the dance. We had over 3 hours of songs, including Spanish song, just to incorporate some Hispanic Heritage Month, knowing that we wanted to have Spanish songs to dedicate it to the students. It went away. So the dance went really great. We had around 920 students show up, and it was amazing. Really good dance outside. It was all thanks to Shannon's husband, Tim, with lights, and made the dance outdoors really amazing. It takes a village, and we took an awesome decoration stance. Then we have a walk and talk November 6th, and PTSA and Brewer are chatting with 9th and 10th grader parents. We have a camp food drive from November 8th to the 19th. It's a class competition, and then class sports started yesterday. Basketball, soccer, wrestling are all excited. Kiana Briggs, girls golf, was 3 strikes away from getting the last playoff sport to move on to the NorCals. And then we were really super proud of her. And then volleyball varsity girls team lost in the second round of NCS on Saturday. We're super proud of them. And then water polo plays tomorrow on NCS playoffs at Novato High School for the first time since 2013, I believe. And then our 3-day weekend was refreshing for our students, and we really appreciated it. So yeah, thank you.
Big report. So that you had 920 students at the dance is like amazing, because they're just never well attended. So over time, that is like just an amazing number. Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first dance since over 2 years, and we had a lot of sophomores and freshmen show up and a bunch of guests, and we were thankful. I personally enjoyed it. I had fun. It didn't feel suffocating. It felt really spacious since we were outside and in such a big area. And if you compare it to like being inside a gym, it feels better, and there's a bunch of like air that you can breathe in. So yeah.
Pretty amazing.
Thank you.
So let's see if trustee Nell can match your report.
I doubt seriously what I have to report out is going to match that, but it is good to hear that, I guess in some way that activities are getting back to normal at our high schools, so appreciate that. It sounded good to me. So just to report out to the rest of the board, I did meet with School Fuel and their board of directors a week ago Tuesday, and they discussed and adopted their budget. They have accepted all of their grant applications from our faculty who put in for funds to run special projects, anywhere from furniture to special curriculum or materials that they would like to have in addition to what we supply. And I think they're in the process of reviewing those, and we'll probably grant out tens of thousands, if not $100,000, hundreds to our teachers to help with the arts and other curriculum. And I think it's important to put out a plug for School Fuel. They are our public school foundation, and they do raise funds. And so those of you who are out there, if you haven't donated to School Fuel yet, please remember to, or pay attention and to see what you can do for them as well. One of the other items they were talking about, they're step up their branding a little bit in their online activity. The other subcommittee meeting I attended was for JLAC, the Joint Legislative Action Committee, where the trustees and the superintendents of Marin County band together and represent ourselves with our legislators in Sacramento. We were talking about our annual trip to Sacramento, which usually takes place in January, but due to COVID restrictions, it doesn't sound like that's going to be a good idea. We discussed doing it as a video, which we did this previous January, which worked out okay, or possibly moving the date up to late April or early May. And our team up there is working with the legislature and trying to facilitate a date that might work, and I'll keep you posted once we come up with that time. So that's my report out today.
Trustee Aguilar.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, I agree. We support School Fuel. I think that we have a sign outside that says NUSD supports School Fuel. I think the sign should be it should be written the other way around, or School Fuel supports NUSD. So hopefully that'll get changed someday. So on October 22nd, not knowing that we were going to have a tour, a public tour for both high schools to show us the new facilities, I went on a private tour for both high schools. And I just wanted to say that, we have I went to the MSA program and looked around there, and then the science buildings and the new facilities on both high schools. And I just have to say, I'm just so pleased with what's going on, with these facilities. And they're gorgeous and new, and it still smells like paint. And I wish we had those when I was in Novato High as a student. And but here's the important thing I want to say is I know learning will take place, and I want to just personally thank the taxpayers for this opportunity, because this, on the 20, that was the 22nd, so I did the tours on both, and then on the just a few days ago we did the public tour for both high schools, and the cutting of the ribbon. And I want to thank NUSD staff and Mike Wooland and Superintendent Dr. Jan Derby for just all this work. And the taxpayers got to be there, and I wish there were more people there, because it's thanks to the taxpayers, and we're going to be talking about that today. And I just want to just say that if it wasn't for them, this wouldn't have happened. And that's so important that people get educated on that and get to see the fruits of their labor, literally. So that's what happened both days. And then just wanted to say special education had their first meeting, and it was an introduction for the year, and They're working very hard, setting goals. And so lots of work ahead. There's always lots of work with special education. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Trustee Jacobson?
Hi. I want to tag on to what Maria said. I completely agree. And I think these are such treasures of our community that our community has invested in. And it is hard to get everyone to see that. Every taxpayer wasn't at these ribbon cuttings. But I do hope that through the different ways that our community can participate in these facilities via seeing shows at the theater or getting their kids out at those fields via their sports, they'll be able to understand. I mean, it's extremely emotional being in those buildings, seeing how the caliber of education that's going to take place there is amazing. So hope everybody gets to see those. I had a site visit at Marin Oaks, so great to see them in full swing. I attended the Budget Advisory Committee. I got to be on a float in the homecoming parade, which was so fun. And that's it.
I as well was able to participate in the homecoming parade for Novato High, so thank you for including us. That was really nice. We haven't done that before. We always just kind of gone and hung out and watch it go by, but it was really nice to be a part of it, so thank you. The ribbon cutting also for Novato High and San Marin for the performing arts and the science buildings. I'm glad we were supposed to do that a whole year ago, and now we just made it happen when we could all get together, and it was done very well, and I'm glad we were able to do it. And again, thanking the community, as my other fellow trustees have done. We really appreciate the community support. I know we're all kind of seeing that on our property tax bill. We just kind of all got that, but it's money well spent, and these facilities will last a very long time, and it's an opportunity to bring our community together, and that's like our performing arts centers. So please, as a community member, come by and see them and enjoy them.
Just a few things. First off, it's been a while since I had a meeting, so I had to think back a little bit, but attended the homecoming game at San Marin High School, Novato versus San Marin. Have to say I'm a little disappointed in the disparity in numbers, but that's another topic for another day. But when you see one side of the field with about a quarter the number of players relative to the other side, there's something wrong when that smaller side is the bigger school. So we'll talk about that, but anyway. But I do want to say thank you to Novato High folks for inviting us to the parade. That was a great experience, not just being part of it, but being able to see everybody there. It was wonderful. So we really appreciate that and really enjoyed it. Also did the ribbon cutting ceremonies as well, of course, and of course extend everything else that everyone else has just said. But would also like to comment on just the classrooms themselves. The science classrooms are stunning in their space, their flexibility, and just their ability to get the students engaged. I heard that from multiple students. I want to say thank you as well to the students who actually took us through those classrooms. They had some great little presentations that were fun to see, but hearing them talk about it, hearing them talk about how those two buildings, one on each campus, are becoming the center for lunch. Kids want to be in those buildings. So it's just incredible, and as Trustee Butler was saying, it's a wonderful investment, and I want to say thank you to the taxpayers of Novato, the homeowners of Novato. You now have world-class high schools, and it's going to really help our community, so thank you.
Trustee Gasson.
Sure. Just a couple things, and I think everything's been said about the ribbon cutting was fabulous, and I'm actually excited about all the other stuff that's been going on as well, seeing Olive and all the changes at Linwood and everything, but it was exceptional to be in those facilities and everybody's enthusiasm, and the kids doing those presentations and the musical performances was the highlight of my week. And the only other thing I'm going to share is that there is a San Marin High School 8th grade information night this Thursday. That's from 6 to 8 p.m. and I will be there. I'm happy to see lots of new families come by, check out the school. And that is it.
Just a couple of quick points. Thank you for both high schools for the homecoming parade down Grant Avenue. I was not able to join Novato High with prior commitment, but I watched San Marin, and that was wonderful. And then I got to go watch the game, and that was wonderful as well. I also got to sit through the opening of both performing arts centers and science buildings. San Marin was built in 1968. Novato High was built in 1955. Homes were selling for about $30,000 a piece. So things have changed. Houses don't sell for $30,000 anymore. But the more important thing is that the kids that go to these schools are going to compete in a business market and a job market that doesn't look like Gestetners or mimeograph machines or carbon paper anymore. They're going to compete in a market that is high-tech and advanced. The top of the tech world is basically the Bay Area. And it is important for this town to be able to give its students the opportunity to be competitive in that marketplace. So this is a down payment on the success of the next generation of Novatoans who are going to come through those schools. So I know each of us don't like the fact that we're having to pay taxes to make this happen. But the fact is, our kids are benefiting, and this town and this role that Novato plays in Marin County is absolutely critically important. And I'm proud to have been part of the team that moved that forward, and I'm even prouder to watch our students take advantage of this opportunity and have career opportunities come to them, so they can take what somebody gave me 50 years ago. I'm going to be able to give back to you guys, and it's a thrill. So that's my 2 cents. And Dr. Derby?
Hey, I just have a few. Schools Rule event happened last week. We couldn't be there because we were all at MSA with the ribbon cutting, but school fuel got 143,158. So that was really good, right? The other thing is Leslie and I met with Novato Community Hospital, which has been a great partner for us. They are going to hold their annual golf tournament in the spring, and all the proceeds will go to our athletic trainers. So I'm hoping that we're going to get teams from both high schools. I'm happy to sponsor a team from each high school myself. And so we would like people to play. It's going to be only 9 holes instead of 18. So I think that will be good too. And lastly, I sent you an email just because it was so sweet. One of our most recently hired maintenance people, Patrick Dempsey, was on his way to work at 5:30 in the morning from Santa Rosa and noticed a distressed person with a flat tire, and without even thinking, went over, helped the person get their tire back on. The person was on his way from Santa Rosa to Southern California for a visit, and it turns out the person wrote me an email because he didn't get the person's name. The person didn't allow him to buy a cup of coffee. Just said, no thanks, I'm on my way to work. It's my 4th day on the job in Nevada Unified. And so Patrick Dempsey stopped to help this stranded person who had never changed a tire in his life. And the person that wrote me the email is Casey D'Angelo, and he was a retired superintendent from Sonoma County. So I was so sweet to get that. So Ellen and I are going tomorrow to see Patrick at work and give him a little certificate and just thanks and let him know how much we appreciate doing kind things when no one is watching, right? That's it.
Cool. Okay. We're going to move on to item number 11, which is presentations from our schools. And Dr. Derby, you want to introduce Amanda Langford and Santa Rosa?
Yes, Amanda's here, and Juliet. Juliet really likes to speak in public, so we're going to have her probably go first. I'm not sure. But I got to visit with them on Thursday, and they were in process of developing their presentation for today. So all about kids, and it's really a great place at San Ramon. So welcome.
Thank you for that introduction. Good evening. It is a really great place at San Ramon, and we work really hard to build a collaborative community, and we're excited to be here tonight to share one of our special projects that we did this year. So my name is Amanda Langford. I'm the principal at San Ramon, and with me is Juliet Jones, who is one of our our teacher on special assignment this year that we're very excited to have, half-time data specialist and half-time MTSS coordinator. So with that, Juliet, do you want to just introduce the project a little bit?
Sure. So one of the things that we feel is really important this year, maybe more so than other years, is our social emotional learning and supporting kids with their feelings and their behavior and how they can learn best in a room full of 25 kids again, or however many kids again, and feel comfortable. So we started off the year with a whole school lesson on our strengths, how our strengths are different from other people. And I think maybe if we see the video, that's the best thing. Thank you.
Great.
Mhm.
One of my strengths is I'm smart. I'm kind. I'm artistic and smart.
Here at San Ramon, we have always prioritized social emotional learning, but this year it seemed especially important to start the year off with some strong lessons and some good community building. So we implemented a whole school lesson based on self-awareness, the first domain of social emotional learning.
But it feels like home. They can say it all sounds
And
great.
what they think are their most important strengths and abilities. It's important for students to identify their strengths and feel strongly about their strengths so that they can lay a strong foundation of confidence that allows them to be helpful to others, to be teachers, and to persevere when things don't come as easily to them. At San Ramon, our strength is our community.
My strengths is that I can adapt quickly.
Strengths are that I'm thoughtful, artistic, and athletic. My strengths are that I am calm, nice, and never want to hurt anyone. My strengths are that I'm caring, smart, and I look out for others.
How do you use your strengths at San Ramon?
You be nice, you be helpful, kind, and help other people. Helping, being kind, respectful, confident, and that's it.
How do you use your strengths at San Ramon?
I help other people with my work.
This is something that we're going to do in 3rd grade, but it's something our whole school is going to do, and we're going to make a really cool
a person shape, and on the person shape, you wrote some characteristics about yourself. What was that project about?
There's a house we can build. Every room inside is filled.
Or remember some of the strengths that you do have in you. And I want you to find a partner to turn and talk. I want you to listen to their strengths, and I want you to share your strengths. You have some of the same strengths as the person next to you. Raise your hand if you have some of the same. Okay. Raise your hand if you had some that were very, very different from the person next to you. So now
What else being good at? And that's what I started our list with. I am good at, James?
I'm good at reading.
At reading.
around, a lot of us have different strengths, but that's really important for us to know and to value, because we can work together with our strengths and make this school just that better of a place.
Of what the world could be, a vision of the one I see. A million dreams is all it's gonna take.
I even went around the whole entire circle and I let you know some strengths that I've seen in you.
Let me be part of it all. Share your dreams with me. You may be
Bully words sink into her heart and soul. Oh my goodness, no. She remembered what Grandma taught her, right? And she used all of her strengths. And what happened in the end of this story?
Close my eyes to see. I close my eyes to see. Every night I lie in The brightest colors fill my head.
A million dreams, a kid.
Our community.
Questions from board members? I think maybe we're speechless. This is an amazing feat. So, Principal Langford, thank you very much for the presentation. My daughter passed through San Ramon Elementary School in times past, and it's great to see the multipurpose room and the outdoor stage and the community taking advantage of the updated physical facilities and the faculty so enthusiastic. It is just like real special to me. Thanks. You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me, we're moving on to item 11B. Dr. Derby, do you want to introduce the county office?
Tarina's here, and Kate's here. Raise your hand, Kate, so we know. These are our partners from MCOE that will be coming to our board meetings once a month, the first board meetings of the month, to talk about updates and how they're supporting us and what the game plan is for us as we progress with the budget.
Oh, sorry. That's great. When you're ready, that little guy. This slide's okay.
Okay, very good. Good evening. I'm back.
We're gonna always put students on right before you.
I know. I think there's something that they say in performing that never perform with children and animals. So I won't even pretend to being able to hold a candle to that wonderful presentation. Very inspiring, very lovely, and very special for us to see all of the really great things that are happening at Novato. But tonight, first of all, good evening, President Millerick, members of the board, Superintendent Jan Latore Derby. Thank you for introducing me and to introducing my colleague, Kate Lane, who is one of our assistant superintendents. Last month, we came before you, and during that meeting, we referred to the district's conditional budget approval, including an addendum that identified additional financial risks. The district's conditional budget approval called on the district to respond to 3 areas. 1, to verify your enrollment and your attendance, which at that time we hadn't finalized. Qualifying the impact of any reduction of revenues associated with the loss of students. And the 3rd one was to initiate a budget advisory committee. During that meeting, we learned that all 3 conditions had been met, and thereafter we approved our budget. We also sincerely appreciated the board's acknowledgement and recognition of the seriousness of the budget problem before you. See if I can get this going. Tonight, we come before you as part of a monthly update of our oversight of your fiscal health. After reviewing the responses to the 3 conditions to the earlier budget approval, it is now clear the district is facing a significant increase to the future deficit spending. And if not addressed now, it will increase $1 million next year to nearly $5 million in the following year. And we suspect the $5 million deficit in the second year may be likely closer to $10 million, which represents about 10% of your budget. We believe this to be the case because currently the district's budget includes one-time COVID-related revenues that may be masking the overall structural deficit. This is largely due to the fact that you have fewer students. As you all know, it is uncommon for us to come to you before you in this way. We do so to declare our serious concern for the future fiscal health of the district. The timing of the district's response is critical. In December, you will all consider your first interim budget. We call on you to pass a resolution at that same time that identifies the scope of the financial problem and that recognizes Future staffing needs need to be consistent with enrollment projections. In support of students, and on behalf of Mary Jane Burke, our county superintendent, we thank you for the hard work you will do to ensure students continue to receive that world-class education you spoke of. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from board members? Marie Aguilar?
No, I just appreciate your presence and coming, the commitment of coming every month, and just reminding us and making sure that we're moving forward in the right direction. And so I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions?
Can we make sure we get that slide? That information?
You bet.
Yep.
We did forward it.
Okay.
I think Ellen has
Yep,
it.
yeah, I'm sure. So my comment is, one more? Or Trustee Mack,
Yeah,
please.
I'll just say thank you, Tarina. Message received before as well as now, even more so. When you say 10 million, that's obviously terrifying. And I'm just going to kind of speak to the community a little bit. If you divide those numbers by roughly 100,000, that's effectively one FTE. So if you look at that 4.8, that's 48 right there. But like you said, that might be conservative.
Right.
So there's a lot of numbers that we're gonna have to go through, and we're gonna have to really get everybody on board in doing this, and that includes not just district office staff, the board, and the union, but it also includes the community. Not just in terms of understanding, but also really rallying for our next agenda item down the road, Measure A. What are we going to do? Unfortunately, the last time we did it, it was pretty much led by us. We didn't really have that much community driving it. I think it's time. We need to have the community step up. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other comments? So I have a comment.
Okay.
December is right around the corner. You're
Yes.
going to be here every month supporting us, and we
Yes.
really appreciate that. These numbers are earth-shaking. Novato School District is the largest enterprise in the town of Novato. This is going to have community impact in multiple ways. But we're about the business. That's what we stood for election for. That's why we have Dr. Derby standing with us to do this, and we're going to do the hard work, and we look forward to being able to meet with you a month from now and be well on our way to put the resolution on the agenda and be well on our way to resolving these problems. It is our commitment to this community and to our regulator, your office, that we will get this fixed, and it's going to be painful. So thank you very much. Diane?
I actually have a question, and in the past, we've talked about how we need to improve our attendance, and there's only so much that we can control, and as a parent, we don't, and with COVID restrictions, has there been any discussion of reaching out to our legislature to talk about how we can get credit instead of missed days because of, you're waiting for a COVID test or something, it's horrible that we're in a position where we want to try to control things that we don't really have control over, but then there's the added challenge of the circumstances that COVID has presented. So is there any
Yes.
discussion on how we can kind of champion for the schools that are impacted by that?
Yes. So I will say Kate Lane is actually leading that conversation, working with the California Department of Education and with your business staff and other business staff from other districts to try and capture short-term independent study to capture those students that might be home waiting in quarantine after testing. We've done an estimation. Your attendance percentage is down by 1%. That 1% may seem like a small number. It actually represents about $750,000 in lost revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very important question, but I want to caution you. First of all, in 1 year, because let's say you were able to ramp up and capture some short-term independent study. You might be able to capture, because we're already almost halfway through the year, believe it or not, you might be able to capture about half of that, $750,000. You have a huge problem, a structural problem. Every little bit counts, and I want to be cautious that we don't think a small fix like that is going to be enough. We'll call it a down payment, and we are definitely walking with you in support of trying to accomplish that.
I think I would even take it to one extra place, I think is what I was getting to is, an example is my daughter woke up with a stuffy nose. So I mean, it was like, we've got to do a COVID test. So I was fortunate to find a home test, but the facilities that I found online weren't open till later in the day. So it was conceivable she would have missed that whole day just because I wanted to have a test. So there's a little bit of a distinction. I know that when you're in quarantine, that they've changed that you can do the 3 days, but it goes to, I'm not, it will nowhere come close to fixing our problem, but it's just one extra thing in the scope of looking at all of it, that maybe there's some opportunities that we can do we talk to Jared Huffman? Do we,
You don't need any legislative fix for this. We have a solution in the
Okay.
queue.
Oh, awesome. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Derby?
Terina and Kate both, thank you so much. We need you, and we want you here, so we're grateful for that. We have been talking about having some sort of a board workshop or a study session and inviting CSEA and NFT so that we're all in the same room hearing the same thing at the same time, and we can understand as a group where we're going and what we need to do.
Great.
So we want to reach out to you. Lois will probably arrange for that, and we'll try to get some dates that coordinate with you. But I think sooner than later, we would like to do something, because it's staggering, as you know, and I can tell that you know the seriousness of this firsthand. So we really want to make sure that we're taking all the steps, and to include our parent groups as well, so that they're understanding what it is that we need to do. Our North Marin Council PTA is a great, wonderful group, and so maybe they can be invited as well, just so that we all understand where we're going and what are the little fixes that we can do together.
Right.
And I know there are little fixes. This is big structural change that we have to make. And I know we're going to get to the other side of it, and we have been through this before, and we do get to the other side of it. But it's challenging between now and that time when we're on the other side. So we need you.
We are here.
Okay, super, thank you.
Good. Yeah, Trustee.
I just want to tag on a little bit to what Dr. Derby was saying. If I recall correctly, when new trustees are brought into MCOE for initial training, we get kind of budget 101.
Yes.
The fundamentals of one times versus ongoing,
Yes.
all that kind of stuff. I really think that's what we really need to get all of the stakeholders on the same page, understanding how the numbers work. That, yes, because our budget is X plus % because of COVID this year, doesn't mean that that money sticks around. That money is gone.
Right.
And that money is designed for one-time spending, not for salaries, those sort of things. So that we all can get on the same page, understand what we're really, truly working with, and at least have an understanding that we're coming from the same place.
Yes.
And then we can be much more effective in trying to figure out how to go forward.
Cool. Okay,
Thank you.
good. Trustee Aguilar?
Yeah, I think this is a great idea, and to have parents' involvement to show up, and trustees to show up, and to be reminded, and also if we can have an interpreter also for the Latino parents too. So.
Okay, we're
I'll
good.
just,
We're going to
I'll
move
just
forward.
add,
Yep.
the most important thing that we want to stress today is timing. This is a problem that cannot wait at all.
Yep.
You've done work before to reduce your budget, to reduce your deficit, and that was great. Unfortunately, you were presented with an additional set of new problems in the last few months.
Mhm.
And those new problems, because you were already dealing with a deficit out in the out years, just exacerbated that. And so I like what I hear. We will be here in support in any way we can. We'll be back again next month.
I'm thrilled.
And we will definitely, we're happy to weigh in on how you craft the resolution. Those resolutions can be very effective communication pieces to ensure that the entire board and the community is very clear about what it is you're trying to solve.
The community's got to get this.
Yeah.
It's got to be that broad. Thank you so much for your.
Well, Trina used the word structural. This is a
Yes.
structural problem. This is not a one-off.
Yeah.
This is not a little one-time year and next year it's going to be perfect,
Yeah.
or the year after that. This is structural. This is your house foundation has cracked and is falling off the foundation. So we have to take this really seriously. We can't just assume, oh, NUSD is going to get money and it'll all work out. No, it's not. It's not what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is serious. So
That's
I just want
exactly
to
right.
stress that. That's how I'm interpreting your presentation tonight.
Yes.
And the one before that.
Trustee Aguilar?
So I just want to make sure that if there's anything else, like the resolution, the open to the public meeting, is there anything else that you're gonna, for this month, that you need from us as trustees, what we can do?
Share the
And it's
word.
a very
Spread the
vague
word.
question, but-
Spread the word.
Yeah.
Be very open and communicative
Yeah.
about what it is you're trying to solve. You're trying to solve a structural problem with your
Yeah.
budget. That's the bottom line. These are not as Trustee Butler described, these are not one-time fixes.
Yeah.
You've done, and this district, I want to say, I was here 10 years ago. For those of you that were on the board, I was here 10 years ago telling a very similar story. You've done this work before.
Yep.
We know you know how to do it. It's never pleasant. It's always hard. And it's always, at the end of the day, students benefit from districts and boards who act early and are clear with their community about what you're trying to solve. And you're trying to ensure that you have that world-class education
Yep.
today and tomorrow.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. They are our customers.
That's right.
You're just our regulator or oversight.
I've never
agency.
heard us referred to as a regulator, but it's okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other final comments? Otherwise, we'll move. Thank you very much. Kate, thank you for joining. It's always good to see you, even if it's behind a mask. Now we're into non-agenda public comment. Or do we have any? We have no public comment, so that's item 12. We're going to move to item 13. And we've flipped the two items that we're going to consider. So the next is discussion of parcel tax for Nevada Unified School District, and Lois is going to do our presentation.
I'm going to introduce the people who are going to do the presentation. So this clearly is a very timely topic, considering what we just discussed. A big part of our revenue, or an important part of the revenue in our budget, is the parcel tax, and it's coming due, as we all know. So it's time to start discussing what our options are, and tonight we have some knowledgeable people to help us start the conversation. Lori Ranieri and Matt Coker from Government Financial Strategies is here, as well as William Tunick, who has visited us before on such a topic, and they're going to go into the various pieces of talking about how to present the parcel tax to the community. And you'll probably hear some new ideas, and I'm hoping that we can look at this maybe in a little bit different light and move forward after tonight. Okay.
Thank you.
So Ellen's going to help and then turn on the computer to Matt, who has a degree in computer science, so
Oh, well
I'm sure
then.
he can figure it out.
I'm going to walk away.
I'm Lori Ranieri, and you saw me greeting the folks from the County Office of Ed, because they are also our client. I've not seen them since COVID. This was the first time I've seen a lot of people in person, so not that I'm happy. Oh, thank you, Matt. Usually the mask does not inhibit the sound of my voice, because I'm very loud. But anyway, I'm not happy that you're facing budget challenges, but I'm happy that you're all working together. And I think this is very apropos of what we want to talk to you about, which is a parcel tax. And so I think Matt has got that going. Thank you. And so you have the materials in your packet, and so I'm going to be rather fast in honor of your time. So if there's anything you want me to slow down about, please just tell me. I want to stop, we want to talk about that, and we want to ask questions. I don't mind being interrupted. So again, I'm Lori, this is Matt, this is William, and we're all working together as a team. Matt and I are with Government Financial Strategies. We've actually, I said to Matt, did you notice in the Novato file that we did work for them in 1991? And he said, did you do that yourself? I said, yes, I did. So, we have worked for you before, but our firm works for about 300 public agencies in California, lots of county office of ed, lots of school districts, and we're basically an extension of your business office with a focus on things that involve taxes and capital funding. And I like to say if it requires a spreadsheet, you don't need to do it every day, we may be able to help. And we worked with William of DWK quite a bit, and I'll let him step over to the microphone and introduce himself if you'd like.
Oh, sure. Well, I'll try to do it from here if I can do it through the mask. I think I've met all one before. William
There's people all over town listening to you.
Oh, and they definitely want to know who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, good evening again. William Chunick with DWK. I know actually you've seen me on some other things, and you'll see me again in a minute. But DWK, we worked on, actually with the district on parcel taxes in the past, on a lot of them in county. So excited to be here to apparently find out if the microphone is working.
It was, yes.
I got to introduce myself again. But in any event, excited to be here again to talk about the parcel tax. So I guess maybe a good way to think of it is if it involves a spreadsheet, or if it doesn't involve a spreadsheet, then you want to talk to us. So turn it back over.
Okay, so one thing that we just like to make sure all of our clients know, as a financial advisor, we're your fiduciary, and that means we provide independent advice and analysis. We represent the district to the capital markets. Our activities are regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Technically, a parcel tax doesn't fall into that realm, but in general, that's who we are, so we want to make sure you know we're regulated. So we're going to go over Measure A. Even though you know all about it, there's some things we want to point out and kind of build on for our discussion. You've just heard a lot about budget trends, but we want to talk about it through the lens of the parcel tax and some considerations, a sample process, suggested next steps, and we have a bunch of things that we're not going to go over that are just for reference, unless you have a question, in which we might refer to them, and you're certainly welcome to look at them and ask us any questions about it. So you all know that Measure A was approved by voters in 2014. It's $251 per parcel. It has an 8-year term, and it expires June 30th, 2023. It has several areas of exemption, and I'm sure you know that we're about 16,500 parcels per year are being charged this tax, and the annual revenue is actually dropping. And so that's an important thing to note. And you can see by virtue of the numbers that you just saw, the amount is very significant, right? If you're looking at a potential revenue loss of 9 million, and this is another, 4-ish, that's a very important part of your budget. And in my view, you talked about the foundation being cracked. I will say a good part of your foundation is the parcel tax, right? That is local money. You can direct it however you put in the measure, and you don't need to restrict yourself in the measure. You can, but you don't need to, and by law you don't need to. And that is a really important part of your budget. And I tell all of our school district clients, if you don't have a parcel tax, we need to be thinking about one. So it's just because it has that local control. Now, there were accountability provisions in Measure A, which are great. The district has annual reports on expenditures. You have an oversight committee, which is fabulous. And they try to meet twice a year and provide an annual report. So that's a good group, of course, to be involved in additional discussions about what you would do next. And I'm sure you've all familiar with what they publish. And this is, I think, a really nice, colorful, and easy to read explanation of the parcel tax revenues and how it's spent, and I think that demonstrates a track record of oversight and citizen involvement in the spending. So looking at our next chart, you can see on this chart, it's not a very interesting chart. You might say, oh, it's only 2 lines, but it shows something really important, which is that our expenditures are growing faster than our revenue, and so obviously as that gap widens, that becomes an increasing concern. And it's just another version of what you just heard from Serena. So, but you can also see how that one-time funding has sort of stemmed the widening gap, but eventually it will get wider if we don't do anything about it. And I think that the implication from the County Office of Ed was to talk about expenditures, but I like to talk about revenues. That's another side of the equation. And we can see here that a couple things. One is that the components of our revenue have fluctuated, and the parcel tax revenue is becoming an increasingly smaller component as expenditures increase and we get more exemptions, right? We're getting less revenue and it's a smaller percentage. So it's actually becoming less important. But given the type of money it is, I'd like to see it be more important, and we're going to talk about that. And of course, we see the effect of the federal stimulus funds. Our employee benefits are a larger portion of the district's expenditures, and this is one of those cycles. And so one of the things we know about deficit spending, for example, is we know that we often are setting aside big revenues in reserve, right, excess revenues in reserve to take us through deficit years. And we often look at a 2, 3, 4-year budget cycle. The multi-year projection is 3 years out, right? We're all comfortable with that idea that we don't have to balance every year if we're looking down the road. But when you think about a longer cycle and you think about staff, obviously that is going through cycles too, 20 and 30-year cycles where we can have an aging demographic and I will say experienced educators, but then that costs more. And so we need to understand those cycles in our expenditures, because those are being driven by things that are somewhat predictable. And of course, our current budget, 4% of our revenue is from the parcel tax, and employee salaries and benefits constitute 82% of total expenditures. So given that that's what we do, right? That's the heart of what we do, and there's only 18% left for everything else. And you know, that 4%, we'd really like to see that at 5% or 6% and give us more stability over time. Now, you just went over some information about the multi-year projection, and this is, I kept checking with Matt. I'm matching the numbers. He's like, they updated that. So I'm sorry, this does not match with what you just saw with the County Office of Ed, but you can see what we see, which is that in 2023-24, the multi-year projection shows the potential loss of parcel tax revenue. So I want to say two things. One is that we don't want to lose that money, but I actually want us to start thinking about some new ways to think about it, so we not only secure it for 2023, 24, but beyond, so that we're not subject to this constant threat to a good, important piece of our financial foundation. So I've already made this point, but I have a fancy graph, so I'll let Matt stop on page 14 real quick, which is that the parcel tax is playing an ever-shrinking role in addressing our salaries, benefits, and other operating expenses. So that is a structural issue that I think we can think about some new ways to deal with. And if we go on page 15, you can see that parcel tax rate at $251, it's not only becoming less efficient because it's a smaller portion of our budget, but it's less efficient because we're actually getting less revenue because we have more exemptions. So it's just something, that's another demographic issue that is somewhat predictable, right? We do know if we're going to be giving exemptions to people as they get over 65, and if people don't move, they stay here, they age in place, we're going to see more of those exemptions. Okay. We're going to invite William up to talk a little bit about the legal side of parcel taxes.
Yep. So as Lori mentioned, parcel taxes from a legal perspective, they're sort of, and you probably know this, they're a reaction or a growth out of Prop 13, which otherwise limited property taxes. What Prop 13 and the following initiatives say is you can have quote-unquote special taxes if they're approved by the voters, and when it comes to school district taxes, which are technically called qualified special taxes, we call them parcel taxes, that has to be approved by 2/3 voters, so 66%, which is about the highest voter threshold there is, which can be difficult. The other thing to know that's specific to school districts is that those taxes have to be applied uniformly, and for a district like yours, it's not really an issue. If you have a tax that's a same amount for every parcel, that's a uniform tax. There are some other districts that have some more creative taxes where that kind of becomes a question sometimes. As far as the parameters, there's actually not a lot in the law about what you can't do, with one exception. The amount of the tax, there's no constraint. It can actually have a lower rate for unimproved parcels. That's something the legislature added, I think about 1.5 years ago. I haven't seen a school district use it, but it is an option. Exemptions, this is an important one. What the law says is because it has to be uniform, you can offer exemptions, but you can only offer the exemptions that are in the law. And those 3 are for senior citizens, which is by far the one that is used most often, as well as for individuals who receive supplemental security income for disabilities or Social Security disability insurance. You have all 3 of those in your current tax. That's something you can include in any renewal as well. The other thing that's optional is an inflation adjustment. This is something we're seeing, I think, more districts do. You can do it either as a fixed inflation rate, so say 2%, 3% a year. I think there's one in Marin that goes as high as 5%. Or you can link it to the CPI, some combination therefore. There's a lot of options there. That is an optional thing. I think to the point that was made before, that helps hedge against the increase in expenditures and inflation that might happen during the term of a parcel tax. And then finally, oversight. The annual report is required. The Independent Citizens Oversight Committee, unlike a bond measure, that is not actually required for parcel tax measures. But again, you have one. Most districts nowadays do include that as an additional oversight and community engagement piece of the parcel tax. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that, but let me maybe turn it back over and we'll talk about kind of the history of parcel taxes. Or do you want to have a question? Oh.
Any questions from the board? I think we're just going to let you finish up and then we'll take them at the end.
Okay, so one of the things that I want to address is that very often, when we think about a parcel tax, we think about the dollar amount, and we think about, is the dollar amount getting too high? And I just wanted to point out that dollar amount's over $201, and we just broke it, you can see, we just used numbers to break it up, but you can see that $201 and above passes by a 77% success rate, and that is the highest of any of the numbers. So one of the things I want to say is, I'm not sure that the number is quite as important as we might think, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about that. I think there's issues of history. Are people used to voting for these things? What's going on in the community, income levels, numbers of measures voters have considered. You talked about your bond measure, and the general political environment, including influence from surrounding communities, the state, and the nation. So we see passage rates at particular elections all over the state follow a pattern. So, you know, you live here, this is your community, you are leaders in this community, so you think about what's going on here. But there is a contagion, no pun intended, you know, from everywhere else. And when other things are on the ballot, and not just even on the ballot, just how people are feeling, right, about the economy, the country, whatever, and about school, for sure. So I want to point out that the measure that did not pass in March of 2020, it did receive a 55.4% yes vote, right? And so the fact is, if you were running for office and you got 55.4%, you say, wow, that's a pretty good win, right? Most of the people were with the measure, right? And it was a huge increase, right? I say huge. I think that the dollar amount to go from 251 to 376, I consider that a very large increase. And people were with you. So what happened? Well, if you look around the state, that was one of the lowest elections in terms of passage rate for both parcel taxes and bonds. People were not feeling good in March of 2020. And I just want to point out, people bring up the pandemic, but the election was right before the lockdown started. So I don't know, I wish I was a little more aware. There was some stock purchases I would have made, you know, right before the first lockdown. But my point is that you did have a lot of people with you, but this requires a 2/3 vote. So what it means is, if you have really any feeling of opposition at all, you know, it's easy to get 1/3 of the people to not be with you, right? Just people who vote, they don't even have to know anything about what you're doing or why you're doing it. They might just vote no because they don't like taxes or whatever, or they're voting no on everything. Now, this is the thing that really got my attention when I said, oh my gosh, we're having lots of elections, and, you know, maybe you think it's not a lot because maybe you're used to running for elections, but I'm thinking, we already take a multi-year projection out 3 years. I like to look out 5 and 10 years when I do a financial analysis of a school district, and to keep staring down this tax term feels very threatening to me in terms of financial stability. Does that make sense? So when I look at it holistically, I think, wow, this is a lot to swallow. And so it makes me want to think about the term. Now, I also want to show this, I guess I'm bringing up again the point I keep making, which is the losing efficiency. I made that again on page 21, so I'm not going to say anything more about that. I do have a tendency to be redundant, and in this case, I was even redundant with slides. So one thing I want to talk about is what could we do that's a new approach? Well, the $251 is obviously what you're charging now. The 376, that was the number, right? That had a well over a majority vote. So somewhere in there is a good number, right? We don't know exactly, but somewhere is. And I say somewhere in there based on history, because of the pandemic, I feel like any kind of public opinion research that you had before, it's just not valid, right? People think everything different. Honestly, I never knew I could spend so much time at home. It's been a shock to me, especially given what I do, because I go around the school districts, and I used to travel 4 days a week, and now I stay home. So, as we all do. So, I mean, life is different. Okay, the term of the tax. I want to encourage us to start thinking about, what about the possibility of a permanent tax without election renewals? Just have a permanent tax. Or another alternative is to have something that under the state law qualifies as a permanent tax, but you do by local decision that you'll have a majority vote, meaning that you'll just restrict yourselves, that you won't continue the tax if you don't get a 50% vote. Does that make sense? Because what you've been doing is subjecting yourselves to a 2/3 vote, which is very difficult to get. Now, there's a lot of historical reasons why people did this, and I can go into that if you want, but the point is, we do have another option. The other thing I want you to think about is the idea of an inflation adjustment. So, if when you had done your first parcel tax, you put an inflation adjustment and no term, you would have naturally risen to over $200 today. So, I'm making this point that, and the other thing about the inflation, it could be automatic. It could be, these are maximum taxes, so the board would always, in any year, have the ability to levy the tax at a lesser amount if you wanted to. You're getting authority to levy the tax. You could levy at a lower number. You don't have to have the inflation. But these are ideas, economic ideas, that would give you more stability in the budget. So let's go to the next page. And so this is a sample process, and one of the things that we have in the sample process is a way of engaging the community. And I heard it said, hey, we need to have the community involved in these issues. Well, one of the questions is, it's hard to get people involved if you don't give them something to decide upon, right? So taking a new approach and being willing to let a group of citizens really grapple with that and think it through, and not just think from a political perspective of what would people vote for, but also what is going to work in the long term to support the budget, support what we're trying to do for students and for employees and for the community. So we have this tonight's presentation on parcel taxes. So of course, your chart might have started early on, but my chart starts when I'm here. That's the first step. I'm here. So we're here talking about this. But what would come next? So we put on here a survey. Now, one of the things I want to say about a survey is sometimes you take a survey, and you had lots of experience with surveys, I think, in this district, and you say, well, what was it worth? It told me what I already knew. Well, maybe it affirms what you already knew, right? If you don't take a survey, you actually risk that there's something out there that you don't know, right? But you can be more sophisticated with your survey. You can do focus groups, first of all, to try and identify what you should be surveying on and try and spot the new issues. So, for example, one of the things with surveys that I read a lot of them, and they often all have the same questions. And I'm like, if the same questions get answered the same way by everybody, because everybody would like lower taxes and more services, right? So we don't need to ask questions about that because we could just guess at that. There's not a lot of risk in not having precision on that one. So we only have so many questions, right? It costs money, and people get bored of answering the questions, and we want a fresh, good response. So what I would say is that We can take some really sophisticated approach to our survey taking to make sure that every question is really valuable to the decisions that we're facing. And we can consider a new way of doing community engagement. And when I say a new way, you might say that everything I could possibly suggest you've done before in many, many ways, because school districts, and I'm sure this district is very open and you engage people. But I would say, I would specifically ask you, are there things that you've done in community engagement that you think fit Novato, but you haven't done them with the parcel tax? And say, are there things that work, that our community is used to, that we have volunteers that like it? How can we do it? How can we bring them into this discussion? And we have the people who've been involved in oversight, and we not only have we've been doing oversight for 16 years, so we not only have people who are doing oversight now, we have people who've done it in the past. I use the term blue ribbon committee, but people say, well, who's on the blue ribbon committee? And the other question is, well, who's not on the blue ribbon committee? And I would say, anybody who's willing to learn about this topic and make a recommendation, we should make room for them, because a lot of people aren't interested in school finance. They're interested in schools, but they're not necessarily interested in school finance. And we could get some really good thinking by being open. And what makes them blue ribbon is that they're willing to do the work and support the decision-making process here. And maybe they'll have some new ideas that we haven't talked about tonight, or you haven't thought of, or I haven't thought of, but we want to be open to that. And then the other thing is, obviously, school has changed a lot, and we have all these COVID rules, and so we're trying to be open, but are people actually seeing what's going on in schools? That video was fantastic, right? Our hearts were soaring with that, and we can do more of that, right? I'm sure that was a lot of trouble to put together, but we can do more to show people what's going on in our schools, and not only show them what's going on in the schools, but show them the importance of the parcel tax dollars in making that happen, so people feel that sense of value and that sense of control, that this is this community's funds going into this community's schools. And then there's a process for documents, and William has talked about that, and he's the expert. Now, one of the choices is June of 2022. There's also November of 2022. And one of the things that an important decision that a survey will help you with is actually when to go. Because there's another interesting thing that a survey does, and a lot of people don't pay as much attention, but in the back of every survey book, and you've seen these before, is your demographics. And there is an aspect of voting, which is people vote who they are. And understanding what your voter demographics is really important, because there are people who will be swayed by participation in the process or have some new ideas, but a lot of people vote based on where they are demographically. And that makes me want to tell you a quick funny story, and it's not going to take too much time. My dad moved to the town where I lived in. I was thrilled, and he got right involved in the local community. And one day he said, I'm going to the city council meeting. And I said, why are you going to the city council meeting? He says, I'm going to protest the increase in water rates. I said, Dad, you don't have a water meter. He said, I don't. I said, no, you don't. You don't get a water bill. He said, I don't. I said, no, you don't. He said, I've been getting a water bill for 55 years. I thought I was. And I said, well, you can protest, but you actually don't have a stake in this fight. So my point is, people don't know, and they have old ideas. The world is new, and we can embrace this in a new and positive way. It's a very heavy burden, the budget description that you just had, but the parcel tax can be, this is how we make our schools great. And I'm sure you've had those conversations, but everything is going to be new in this post-COVID world. So our suggestion is not only that you consider a survey, but that we consider even how we consider the questions in a new way and get some new ideas, and think about a blue ribbon committee and actually giving them the power to make the recommendation as to what would be done. Now, maybe you don't, you want to give them a more limited mission, but I think when you get people studying one issue like that and really working on it, sometimes you really get a very strong idea coming out of that. And just to give you an idea, I have worked with committees as small as 3 people and as large as 100. So I'm not afraid of being very, very open with the participation. What I am afraid of is how to do all that on Zoom, but I'm sure we can figure it out. The schools are operating. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. There's more information to reference, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions from trustees? Trustee Aguilar.
Yeah, so thank you for being here. I think this information is very, very important for all our population here in Novato, all our population, everybody that because everybody, if this passes, everybody will pay. And so this needs to be this needs to be shared with everybody. And like tonight's presentation, I mean, for my taste, thank you for being here. With all respect, I mean, you know, I'm thinking about the population outside of this room. You know, if they go into the website, they'll probably hear that, you know, we're speaking too fast, not on the microphone. The masks don't help, and there's so many important information that needs to be addressed to them. So this is just the beginning, but I agree with having a survey, although I want to make sure that that the surveys are, that we really think about the questions and that we make sure we include everybody, because as you know, here in Novato we have a large population that can make a difference how this vote turns out. And so I want to make sure that the survey is, you know, open-ended, and whether that means that they have the opportunity to write on the back whatever they want to write, the concerns, community meetings, interpretation. I mean, I think all those things are really important. So I appreciate the new way. I just want to make sure that we include all in the new way.
Trustee Mack?
Looking at one of the slides, let's see, number 28, it's further down from where you are. It's interesting, tells an interesting story. Kind of makes me feel a little bit better, but not much, about what happened to us in March of 20. It looks like that was just a bad time to be going out. And, you know, who knows what could have happened if we waited till the general election. But anyway, it's an interesting, it does give me a little bit more optimism, I guess, that we might be able to pull this off. But I'll tell you, I am still, you know, once bitten, twice shy, you know. Yes, we got 55% of the vote, but we didn't get what we needed. And unfortunately, beyond that, there's a lot of negativity in this community that we have to get through and reach out to and get everybody on the same page. And it could be very well that it goes a long way to what you're saying about the way we craft it in terms of its scope and those sort of things, and listen and do that. And maybe that is really all we need to do. So I'll say this, coming in, very pessimistic about this stuff, ready to do a zero-based budget, assuming no parcel tax, because that's where we're at. But I have to say that you're giving me some, you know, positivity. I'll just leave it at that. I won't say optimist, but positivity. So thank you.
Any other comments, Trustee Aguilar?
Yeah.
You want to speak?
So, thank you, Trustee Mack, for your comments. I agree with everything you said. I just don't agree with the word negativity. I don't think the people that voted against this are negative people. I think that's fine. But I think that there's a lot of, instead of saying the word negativity, I think that there's a lot of people that are concerned. And I think that the way to kind of tackle it, like you're saying, would be to educate. We need to educate. I once heard Trustee Gasson say that, and I totally agree. We need to educate and when I say educate them, I mean us too. And this is why, again, thank you, Superintendent, for bringing up future forums and so that we can all be educated on what is a parcel tax. What is a parcel tax? What is the bond? What's it going to do? What's it not going to do? I mean, just go back to the basics, because I really think that's what's missing, is just that we just kind of assume everybody knows, and we kind of take for granted the people that, some people. So we want to make sure that, again, that we can all educate ourselves so that we can have this opportunity to pass this, if so be it.
Okay. We have a public comment, I believe, on this item, and second trustee, or former trustee, Mr. Harris would like to speak as well. And the first card that I have is from, it's Mr. Harris. Oh, yeah, good, thank you. So, please. Is it Ellen or Alan? I get confused. No, call me Al. You call her and call Al. Yeah. You want to?
I had one question.
Test.
For Lori. Lori, when you mentioned what the dates were for a renewal of the parcel tax, you stopped at November of 2022. What about the election in March of 2023?
Right. In fact, you and Mr. Colker were on the exact same wavelength, because he said, why did you just stopped about November 22. So interestingly, and Will is here as well to address this, you can have an election for a parcel tax on any day that is not already the day of an election, or, within 7 days, I think you have to be on that election day, right? You can't put your election a week of or a week after a regularly scheduled election. But, so you can either join a regularly scheduled election, you can pick your own election day, you could potentially do an all mail-in ballot, you could do an in-person ballot, a lot of people do the mail, and you could keep on going out into the future. So, why am I focused on 2022? Because with the term that we have, I wouldn't want us to miss a good election day because we weren't thinking about it. But one of the things in the thought process is to decide, should it be in 2022? Should it be in 2023? What kind of election should it be? Those are all detailed considerations to be put forward.
As a former, or I guess still a current member of the Parcel Tax Oversight Committee, as well as the Budget Committee, the question has gone around in my mind. In the past, since 1980-something, the district has always gone for a parcel tax that identifies a set of specific returns. Library, smaller class size. What are some others?
Visual and performing arts.
Visual and performing arts, right. Waiting later in the cycle till it's do it or die may be a more persuasive argument for the community at large. If the measure fails, the school district closes, goes through some kind of a upheaval that is impossible to imagine. Have you considered the pros and cons of that kind of approach? I know it contains more risk, but
Right, so my recommendation is that the district engage in a community process to consider all of these questions. Because I think that people really talking it through is going to reveal what is the best course of action. And I want to say something else, which is that careful, thoughtful, committed people choosing a course of action often then make that course the success. And by being very open
and inclusive, and I'm not saying that you weren't before, I'm just saying to have a very specified effort on to discuss this parcel tax renewal and to take a different approach, to get as many people as we can involved. That means we have that much more power and enthusiasm and commitment to doing whatever it is that people think we should do. So, I've seen communities be successful in a lot of ways, but one thing I think is not successful is having a consultant come from out of town and give you their playbook from how they did it somewhere else. I think it has to feel to the people here like it's theirs. And so that's why I recommend a process to vet all of these questions that you're bringing out. I don't have the answers, but I know how to make a committee agenda and help support people in having a conversation,
Trustee Gaston?
So thank you for saying that. I've actually been a part of the parcel tax for, I realized tonight, over 15 years on and off. I was a part of the oversight before I had kids, and my oldest is 14 now. And I think that I've co-chaired one of the 2014 campaign and participated heavily in this last one. And I think we really do need to have the community come to the table and say, okay, what was the challenges? And actually, I'll take a step back. It's almost like a reset, because what I'm noticing is we've just been repeating or regurgitating everything, and we've gotten to a point where, because we didn't have an inflator, those things that we were paying for can't be covered as much because the costs of salaries just automatically increase. And so looking at it from new eyes and what, has changed over the 10 years that I've had my kids in school, or however many years it is, but things have changed too from the last time. So where are our priorities, and actually talking to people rather than doing these surveys that we may not accurately hear about concerns that they may have that factor into their decisions about what they would be willing to support, and getting that support started from those individuals. And I've mentioned before, I think a good place to start is with the people who have helped with the bond and the parcel tax campaign as a start, because those are people that invested a lot of their time and saw a lot of, from being out and talking to people and stuff. So starting there and building out from that, I think, would be really critical for now.
So I have a couple of comments, and Julie, and then Trustee Nell, do you have some comments? Okay. So what's been presented before us for this item, and I don't know if you're done with your slide presentation, or if you want it. You're okay. Good. Okay. It says superintendent staff recommend discussion and possible direction regarding planning and implementation of a parcel tax election. So we have a pretty broad question that the superintendent's asked us in terms of what we should be doing. So we could say we want to go think about it, to we want to adopt the page 23 as our plan. We have some choices. And we have, in this case, we're working with a different, Lori didn't work with us directly in the last parcel tax. It's a different team, so we got to, there's some thoughts that go about that. So like I always say this, I'm an engineer. I like action. I'm not a scientist. I don't want to study how it might work. I want to put a plan in place that'll get us to where we go. And my sense, I appreciate you pointed out that 55% of this community already supports this district. And it's been pointed out here, and it's clear if you walk around the streets, there's some people who have some concerns that we need to address, and we have some hard work to do. Your next recommendation is to do a survey and to go through and put a process together to dig deeper, to uncover those unstated or not so clear issues and be able for us to be put in a position. And your initial recommendation is, you gave us 2 dates, June and November. We've heard a third one mentioned. The idea of let's get right up to the brittle edge of this whole thing and see if that scares people enough makes me a little bit nervous. So I'm inclined to go with an earlier date. But I think the question in front of us is, do we want to engage Lori and her team to go through to a survey to start us down this process that she's laid out on page 23? I think that's So,
If I-
so
if I-
maybe we can clarify the question so
Yeah,
we
yeah,
know what we're
maybe
answering.
the superintendent, I'm sure, knows what she wants, but I
Well,
just want to
we-
say.
we're gonna ask her.
We're a
That's
financial,
always a good thing to do.
okay, we're a financial firm. We don't do surveys.
Oh, okay,
We don't do political consulting.
okay.
But because community engagement involves a lot of financial questions, we have gotten into supporting our clients doing community engagement. So that's where I have a lot of experience running committees, and I've done them everything from things like this to investigating fraud. So I've done that all over the state. So our role is as the district's financial advisor. So there would be a survey firm engaged, and what I'm recommending is that we start with a very inclusive process, even with that. So if we were going to do a survey, I would recommend that we do a request for proposal, that we consider doing focus groups as part of that to help that survey company know what they should be looking at and to help us make the choice. So that at every step, rather than have this be something that consultants from outside bring in, that people who are in the community that have an interest can be part of the decision-making process, not only for their information, but also because their participation will evidence their buy-in, right? So there's just a lot of decisions that I think are often made by consultants that you have volunteers that would be happy to help with, you know?
So let me take your good wisdom and do just what you said and ask the superintendent what she has in mind for this evening's work and see what she's asking of us. Dr. Derby?
Sure. I would say that we need to start sooner than later. I fear waiting and then not having it pass, and the devastation to the district we won't be able to recover. And so if we want to get started on something and get a survey and getting a group of people together and seeing what the survey says and then making a decision from there, we would be on a tight timeline to do something this spring. But I do think we can do it. I think it also demonstrates to the community that we want to save this district. We don't want to see it go under, and we don't want to see our programs so devastated that we can't come back and give the kids what they need. So that would be my suggestion. I like Lori's recommendations. I like that we need to start with a large group and get as many voices at the table as we possibly can. And then look at the survey, look at the results, have her help us with that, and then we go from there.
So commit to the schedule up through the survey steps
Start.
and assess.
Uh-huh.
Does the board members, trustee? Oh,
No, after you, someone else.
Julie, pardon me, Julie, I didn't write it down. Trustee Jacobson.
This actually speaks to that. I have two things, one general and one for you guys. So we have kind of a pool that I don't think we've tapped into, and that's our alumni information. And I wonder if we could use that even just from PTA lists or students that have already graduated. And even if we're sending out mailers or emails and they go to their families and not them, there's an emotional connection there of, oh yes, I remember when my kid was in that sport, and I remember how great it was when they got all of those things they needed or whatever. That's going to bring our community in. So I think we need to find a way to tap into that. And then general question to you guys. On slide 22, I think, it talks about permanent and majority vote. Can you talk about those things in their contrast to the timelines that we've created and the 66%?
So the approval of a parcel tax requires a 2/3 vote initially. There's nothing in the statute that requires a term. That was done in the past in your documentation. Now, it may have started back in the 80s with a belief that it needed to be there. You know what I mean? I don't know, but back then a lot of people thought it did, but it actually didn't. So there was an awareness that developed over years that, hey, these things could be permanent, right? And so the suggestion that I have, because we're in finance, we want you to have a stable financial source here, is to have it be permanent, but if it's important to you to have some kind of term control, that rather than restrict yourself that this thing that you've just passed would end in 8 years or whatever it is, that you say, here's the tax, but that the board will agree that it won't continue to levy the tax until it gets a 50% vote to continue. Does that make sense? That is something you could just put in your local documentation. Now, I just say, those are things I'd like to see a community process to discuss and see how people feel about it, because I think that sometimes we're giving people accountability in the wrong area. Maybe not the, you know what I mean, not the area that they care about. They might care more about how the money is spent than they care that it stops and that we have, and not only, there's also the expense of additional elections, right? And the distraction and to me, the financial threat.
Okay, Trustee Mack?
Just really a question and then an idea, a proposal. Question is, so we went through this process, I guess late 19 through early 20. We didn't do this. Maybe this is a discussion for us offline, but I'd like to understand how it is that now we're discovering all these new ideas. And maybe that's just...
Lori's here.
I get it. Yeah, okay. So, and I'll take that offline, but I think that's something that's important, and I really appreciate what you brought forward, especially just when you talk about term. That's huge. I agree with that. My proposal, slide 23. I would propose that we go with that process, and then we would ask staff to come back with dates to assign to each of those steps, and then go from there.
So that's broader than just getting through the survey, that's putting a proposal
Well,
in
I'm
place.
basically saying, let's adopt that process, the survey step one, let's
Okay.
put some dates on each one of those things.
Doable?
And not just dates, but also resources.
Okay,
So whether.
Dr. Derby says that's a doable proposal.
Okay, so dates, resources being who and dollars. And then let's share that. Let's, to the team's point, let's be as public as possible.
So, Trustee Aguilar, and I want to wrap this up because we have to move on to other items, so.
Is that a motion?
So do you want to put that in a
I'll
formal
move,
motion?
yeah. Do I need to say it again, or
So then
I'll
if
call that
that's-
a motion?
if-
Is that okay?
If that's a motion, I'll need a second. Trustee Jacobson seconds that. So Trustee Aguilar, comments?
Yeah, comment, when you say who, I'm wondering, would it be, I would like to see, again, back to education and educating ourselves on what this will do if it passes or what it will do if it doesn't pass. And I'm thinking if we reach out to the principals and have the principals say, this program will benefit, if it passes, this program will suffer if it doesn't pass, or, so just again, so that we can educate ourselves, everyone in this room, everyone in the community, and it's just as detailed as we can. And I don't know if that's what you meant, Trustee Mack, by like who, but so that's all.
Trustee Jacobson, pardon me, Trustee Gasson? I've already called in.
I like it when I'm a doctor, but so just really quickly.
I can make you a doctor too.
Yeah, so I like that. I actually like this a lot because I think we just really need to listen to what our community wants, and I would get frustrated because we're in Novato, we're not Southern Marin, we're not, we're Novato, we're great, but one of the things I'm stumbling on, and I could see where the committee or the group can vet this out, but I'm lost on the idea that there's no expiration, and I think the reason I'm stuck on that is because having been through all these processes and stuff, is that the hope was always that we would replace it with something new, or the fact that it was stagnant because we didn't have an inflator. So is the idea that you would go out, let's just say hypothetically, it's an amount, it has an inflator, and it just stays, but how do you then, if you have more need, or do you just add something on after that? Do you go out for a different one, or?
That's a great question. So there's lots of ways we could do it, and that's one of the reasons for the conversation, which I'm actually suggesting that, we would propose some civic engagement even before a survey gets put together, right, in part of that process. But let's find out, what is meaningful to people. If financial stability is meaningful, then permanent and inflator are important, right?
Mm-hmm.
If local control is important, then they're gonna want even more than just inflation, because you're gonna want more of the financial control to come from your local tax base than elsewhere, right? And you can have a 2-tier system, you can have a 3-tier system. There's so many options here. There is nothing in statute that is called the parcel tax, which is kind of interesting. It's actually called a special tax. And the parcel reference comes from the words that it has to be levied uniform by parcel. But that there's all these other things that we can be creative about. And what I find is that in any kind of institutional place like a school district, we get stuck on how we've done it. And that's why that community engagement is so important, because people say, well, why don't we do it this way? Or why are we stuck on that? And we start to think, well, maybe we can. Let's figure out a way to meet that idea. And so that's what excites me, is to try and do something that really feels like it comes from Novato.
Yep.
And I also want to say, in terms of being inclusive, we can also do this kind of thing in many languages. So I don't know what languages you have here, but we
least
really
2.
want to be inclusive.
So can I'd like to bring this to closure. Are we ready to take a vote on the motion that's before us, which is this schedule? So we have our principals, our elementary school principals all here this evening, so are we ready? So with that, I'm gonna ask for the motion, for the approval of the motion that Greg Mack proposed, which is to bring the schedule forward with the timeline. We didn't talk about any budget issues. I'm assuming there'll be some dollars tied to this when it comes forward. All in favor? An advisory vote. Danny, thank you very much. 7 trustees in favor, none opposed. Lori, team, thank you very much.
Thank you.
William, thank you. Oh, he's got more to do? Oh, man.
We have one more item.
Okay,
for
thank you, Lori.
redistricting.
Okay, we're at 13B, is that his item?
Yeah. It's A, remember we had to switch it.
We switched
Yeah.
them.
We switched A to B, and then B became A, and now we're
We're doing approval of redistricting analysis.
districting, yeah.
Okay,
So we had some, just really briefly, while William's getting ready, we had some celebration because we thought we were gonna have to redistrict, because we thought that our threshold was less than 10% change with the new census, but it's not. So now that we know that, there are some changes that are required so that we are aligning ourselves with the new census. I think that's important for us to be transparent about and to share that this is what needs to be done. William and, we have the phone? Okay, and so the consulting company that's really doing the redistricting is on the phone because they can't be here, and William's taking over. What can I say? So Cooperative Strategies is on the phone. It's not Justin, who we're used to working with, but it's Doug, and he's very familiar with the maps because they've been working on them and consulting with me and William, and we had some conference calls, so now we know that we do have to redistrict, so. That's it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome again, or welcome to myself again. And I realized previously I made a statement about not calling us if you have spreadsheets, and I'm going to give you a presentation that has spreadsheets, so I'll make an exception for today. And as Superintendent mentioned, we have Doug Mendy, which is with Cooperative Strategies. We've been working closely with him and Justin Rich on this. So when I was here last time to talk about this issue, actually I think 2 times ago, originally we talked about the redistricting requirement, and what that is for districts and actually city councils, state legislatures, anyone that has trustee areas or district elections, when the census data is released, in this case that was in September, actually go to the next slide, September of 2021, all those agencies have to look at their trustee areas and determine if they're still population balanced given the new trustee information. Unfortunately, because of COVID and other things, we got that data a little bit late. It came in September of this year. Usually that would come in the spring. But it showed us a couple things, and on this slide we're kind of...
pardon me, that was me, my error.
We're just summarizing some of those, what that data told us. One thing, as far as overall growth for the district, not actually a lot, 3% total growth. But as you can see from that chart there, the growth was not proportional. In other words, it wasn't the same in every trustee area. So what you're looking at here is the census data, the population per trustee area in 2010, that same information in 2020, and the change. And I think we talked about this last time. The important thing we're looking at with the demographers is what that variance column tells us. And what that is that it's if we take the total population of the district, we divide by 7, that's our ideal population count for each trustee area. That variance is telling you how much under or over that number is. So going back to 2010, you can see we were at 8.75. When we take the 2020 census data, overlay that on your current trustee areas, then we get to 12.3%. And as I mentioned last time, sort of the bright line test is about 10%. We want to be under that, but if you're over that, then clearly there's a need to redistrict. And as you can tell here, when we'll get into this a little bit further, what you can see is if you look at trustee areas 3 and 4, and you go over to the 2020 census where there's a variance, you can see 3 is 8% high, 4 is 4% low. So that's the primary cause really of that 12.3 number, is those two areas being disproportionately, either in one case not growing very much or in the other case growing a lot. And so that's what we'll be talking about in a minute. The other thing that I wanted to just briefly reference, or it was referenced by the superintendent, was some of the challenges that we ran into with this analysis. One thing that actually we were seeing with your district and others at about the same time when we were working through this was between the 2010 census and 2020 census, the Census Bureau decided that there were 200,000 census blocks, which is the data, how we get data and population, that they didn't think were worth having anymore. And so what they did was they'd take 3 or 4 census blocks that we used to have separate lines for with data, and they put them all together and gave us one big block, which is much less precise. In your district's case, in a couple of places, that happened right on trustee area boundary lines. And when the analysis first got ran, when we actually looked at the maps looked different. And we were trying to figure out why is it that the maps look different than they did in 2010? Well, the answer is those census blocks moved. So we went back, actually Doug and Justin spent a lot of time going back and recreating the population based on your existing lines, and that's how we came to this 12.3 number. So this is actually a very precise number given the data that we have. So just, again, more background information as far as this is demographics for your district, and as we talked about last time, sometimes this is going to look different than your student population. Here we have total population, age over 18, and total population is what we use for the balancing. The other ones are really more for information. The other kind of category of information you get is what we call CVAP, which is citizen voting age population, so basically eligible voters. This is important when we look at whether or not you can draw a trustee area that is a majority, in California, usually either Hispanic, Latino, sometimes Black, African American, or sometimes Asian. Given numerically that it's only 10% of the district, that would make it nearly impossible, if not impossible, to draw a majority area that was Latino, that being the largest protected class that you have in the district. But that's something we're always looking at when we're doing trustee area work. And I'll come back to this. This is your current trustee area map, so it should look familiar. And I want to come back to this in a minute, and we'll talk about where the revisions may need to be. So this chart sort of summarizes everything we talked about. Where you want to be, I'm going to step away from the mic for 1 second so I can point. The important things, again, where we're looking at trustee area 3, the 8.2%, and trustee area 4, the 4.1 negative. Those are the two trustee areas that are really creating that 12% imbalance. And so those are where we would be looking at making revisions. And again, the revisions are focused on bringing that population back. If we go back one slide, so what we're talking about again is area 4 is underpopulated, area 3 is overpopulated. And so as you can see, they don't touch, but what we have is this kind of common area here. I think that's running along Nevada Boulevard. And what would likely be required is shifting some of 4 into 5 and some of 5 into 3 along that area. And that should be, again, when we go through this process, what we're looking for not necessarily is to redo the entire process that you did when you adopted the maps, because that was the result of a lot of community engagement and thought by the board. We don't need to reinvent the wheel in a sense. What we're trying to do is figure out how do we respect that and make the necessary population changes to get us back under 10%. And while we haven't actually started on that work, that's most likely what we would be looking at. And I'm sure Doug will correct me if I am overstating that at all. And then, so anyway, this is the summary. Last thing, just real quickly, these are some of the same considerations we talked about, or you talked about when you went through this process the first time. Again, while we'll be looking at all of these, primarily that population one, which is the first criteria, we're going to be looking to make minimal changes to just bring that population balance in, not necessarily revising the entire map. So, with that summary, Doug, unless I missed anything or got anything wrong. Okay, perfect. I'm a demographer now.
Okay.
If there's
You good?
if there's any questions, be happy to
Questions for the
answer.
board? Trustee Mack, and then I have a question. Yeah. No, you go. Yeah,
Okay.
we get the,
So
we take the bullets.
it seems I'm looking at the map actually. So if you pull that up, so 3 and 4, and shoot, I'm trying to remember. So Diane, you're 4, I guess, right?
I'm 5.
5, okay. And you're 3? Okay, so, and 4 is the vacant one, right?
Yeah.
Along with 2. Okay, got it. So if the intention is, or the best solution is to do some sort of a kind of an in and out with 3 and 4, right? A swap. How do you do that when they're not contiguous, when they don't connect?
Yeah, so, and actually, this was something I should have mentioned at the end of the presentation, but I'll answer your question, which is that what we'll be doing is with board direction tonight, the next steps in this process is to come back with draft maps that show how those revisions may be made, and there may be a couple different looks to how that'll happen. So that'll be the next steps in this process. We're not gonna just go off and you'll never see this again. What would probably happen is you take a portion of probably this corner of 5, move that into 4, so you'd move the 4 boundary west, and then to offset that, you'd move the 5 boundary into 3. So essentially, we'd kind of shift from right to left.
Okay.
So it affects three trustee areas.
Right, understood.
Yeah. 3, 5, and 3,
And
4,
then,
5.
is there any need for us to consider election cycles in this? Probably not, right? I mean, because you got, 1, 7, 2, and 3 in one cycle, and then 4, 5, and 6 in the upcoming cycle. Is that relevant?
Not really, and the changes
Okay.
we're going to be making, we're probably not going to be affecting any of that, so I don't think we'd need to be looking at that this time.
Yep.
So the topic that's before us is, the recommendation is superintendent recommends the board direct staff and cooperative strategies to prepare revised population balance trust area maps for the board's review. So our duty tonight is kick these guys off and get them going. The
I'll make a
deeper
motion.
conversation. You want to move? Did
Yeah,
you just
I'll
move?
Yeah.
Yeah, Julie just moved, or Debbie just moved. Derek just seconded. Any other comments? Okay, we got principals waiting for us, so all in favor? Danny, a revisory vote, yeah, 7, 1 advisory vote, we're good. Sir, thank you very much. We have a whole, people who have to go to work in the morning.
No problem, pleasure to be here.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Doug.
You're welcome. Okay, the next item is number C, approval of the single plan for student achievement, 8 of them. Dr. Derby?
Right, so you started out with a lot of fun from San Ramon, and now we're gonna have more fun. Because we get to hear about all the schools and all the things that they're doing to implement the 3 Cs. And I think it's important for you to hear how differently they do that and what they have in common as well. And Jen's going to kick it off like she did the other night, and then each of the principals will come up and share their own plans. And it's really important for you to know that Jen had the changes made in the format so that we are ready for a compliance review. And it's very important to know that there's all of these things that she had to be watching out for and the changes that need to be made. So you're going to see a little different format, and you probably have already read them. But it is in preparation for what we need to do for compliance, which is great. So I would like to hold the questions, if you can jot questions down for each one, to hold them to the end, and then we can ask any questions that you like. Okay, thank you, Jen.
Okay,
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you so much for having us tonight. Trustees and Superintendent Derby, as mentioned, we're here tonight with the elementary school principals to present their single plans for student achievement. You heard a very similar introduction last week, so I'm going to be very brief. But I do want to speak a moment to what Superintendent Derby mentioned, and also just say a bit of thanks, obviously, to Susie Hirschfield, who helps me with all of that compliance, but also to our principals. This template is not easy to use. You'll notice it looks a lot like our LCAP template. It's the first year that we've transitioned to this for our SIPSs as well. So thank you to all of you. It is clunky. We are learning, but it will make sure that we are in compliance when our next federal review comes to way. So each school district, or any school district that is receiving funds through consolidated application, is required to submit a formal SIPSA each year. Historically, we've brought these SIPSas to you in the spring. This year, we made a very conscious effort to bring them to you earlier because we really wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to set goals and then monitor those goals. It's very hard for us to see what kind of growth we're making when we haven't achieved our goals or we haven't set our goals until March. So we're excited to see this shift and that everyone in this room was on board with moving in that direction. So in your presentation tonight, you're going to see that we have our typical 3 culture goals: our culture of caring, our culture of competence, and our culture of excellence. The biggest difference you're noticing on our slides or our presentations today is the addition of those very specific metrics, like moving our goals to the beginning of the school year. Our fourth goal, or our focus goal in our LCAP this year, is high quality data, making sure that we're actually measuring growth. And when we look at our fiscal responsibility, are the things that we're doing actually having an income and outcome for students? And so that's really our biggest goal. And so you'll see here what our metrics are as a district, and you're going to hear from our principals about what their metrics and their goals are at their individual school sites. So we'll be looking at our school's Youth Truth Climate Survey for our culture of caring. We're going to be focusing most directly on relationships, communication, and culture. For our culture of competence, or MTSS, we're going to be talking about the implementation of academic and social emotional tiered supports and how we're moving students in and out of those different supports. And then our final goal, our culture of excellence, we'll be looking at the implementation of our proficiency scales. This will be the first year that all staff is going to be implementing those, and we're excited to see that rolling out as we speak. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first principal of the night, Ms. Tenia Chima from Loma Verde Elementary School. And to kind of keep this flowing, they're just going to introduce the next person and move the slides forward. So we'll do questions at the end.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Jen. Good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Derby. My name is Tenia Chima, and I'm privileged daily to serve as principal of Loma Verde. I'm here to present our single plan tonight. There's a lot of great work happening at all sites. There's a lot of great work happening at Loma Verde in this year of resilience and joy, and this is really a quick synopsis, because as Jen said, if we were to share everything, it would be here much longer. So our goals are focused around the 3 areas. We're continuing to foster a culture of caring. We are really utilizing our social emotional lead, TOSA, teacher on special assignment, to reinvigorate our morning meetings that we have once a week. She's also working with small groups to develop social emotional skills for our students as they reintegrate back into school. And we're doing all of this around our campus to make sure that we're using a trauma-informed lens, and kind of hinting to what San Ramon shared too, to really build competency and agency and use strength-based language with our students. And so really highlighting what is something that they're able to do that they're good at, so that we can build from that point forward. We're expanding our culture of competence. So really identifying at Loma Verde what are our tiers of support, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and doing all of that under the umbrella of data-based decisions. So using our data TOSA and our SEL TOSA to make sure that we have data for pre, for post, and that we're really tracking the progress of our students in their behavior goals, in their essential standards, and implementing data cycles effectively throughout. And we're also deepening our culture of excellence, really focusing on math and using our learning maps to involve our students in the conversation of where they are, where their progress is, how they're doing in their learning from TK all the way to 5th grade. We're using our PD time to make sure that we have vertical articulation around our essential standards in math. And we're mapping our vocabulary and our strategies to make sure that we're delivering skills in a consistent way that is building upon from year to year. This year has already and will continue to have unique challenges, but Loma Verde has a committed, focused, and collaborative staff that's working together to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our students in this unique time. And I couldn't be any prouder to be part of that team. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We're going to take cold questions to the end,
Lou Sutton.
so we'll just keep
Miss-
moving forward. Thank you very
Oh.
much.
Lou Sutton, I
Yep,
see it
yep.
went too fast.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Board of Trustees and Superintendent Derby, for having us today. I need to lower this. My legs were falling asleep in those chairs. All right, thanks for having me. And letting me share a little bit about Lou Sutton and just give you a glimpse of, just like Tanya was saying, what we are doing on site. There is so much more happening, and I'd love to see all of you come visit us at some point. So within the culture of caring, we also have an SEL specialist who is working with students one-to-one and in small groups to support our students just with conflict management, any sort of social skills that they need. And then another part of our culture of care is really engaging our parent community. And we're doing this currently through parent technology classes, supporting families, and even doing skills as simple as emailing the school, emailing their teacher, communicating all the way up to using Google Classroom and engaging more with grades and assignments. And we're also doing some literacy classes for parents where they are learning English through reading stories with their students. In culture of competence, looking at expanding the multi-tiered systems of support. We have a data specialist, and again, our focus is on data and taking the academic data that we have to build goals for each of our students, which leads to our universal access time. Another focus for us where we're differentiating instruction for all students. And then implementing interventions. So we have a reading interventionist on site who's supporting our struggling readers, and then moving forward and having before and after school interventions to support our students all around. And then in culture of excellence, working on our PBE scales and using skills to guide our instruction, and then implementing student learning maps to engage student voice in their learning. And we actually had a great PD on that yesterday. And I see the excitement for that coming at our site. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Linwood. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Melissa Diaz, and I'm the proud principal of Linwood Elementary School. And I always like to shout out that I am also a product, like some of my colleagues here tonight, of NUSD, which is pretty amazing. So some of the great work that we're doing here, I love listening to my colleagues, and we're all jotting down these ideas as we're listening to them, right? Because they're great ideas. A lot of it is very, very similar. Focusing on our culture of caring, we are integrating a social and emotional learning into our academic and daily routines that aligns with NUSD 6 Cs. We're hyper-focused on strengthening our relationships and communication with all stakeholders. And we do this through morning meetings with our students and our staff, weekly communication to families and our staff. You're seeing our tiger tails come through every week. Revamping our SST process. And as we move to that culture of competence, I just wanted to add, because I'm hearing my colleagues say it too, data is woven throughout all of this. And so we're also utilizing our data under our culture of caring and into our competence. We are intentionally expanding a solid MTSS program at Linwood, very specific to our needs and our students, as well as our families and our employees. Through that, we have an MTSS team that we've established, and we meet quite often. We are providing universal access to our students. We have an MTSS coordinator this year, and we have an SEL and SST coordinator, as well as a reset classroom on site. Moving down into our culture of excellence, we are committed to clearly communicating learning outcomes to all stakeholders, specifically around our social and emotional learning as well as PBE. We're focused on using data to help build meaningful relationships, ignite curiosity, and really personalize the learning experience. And then finally, we are using culturally relevant teaching practices to build learning partnerships with our students. And next up,
Olive?
have Olive.
Yep, thank you very much, Melissa.
Good evening, board. My name is Lori Nuno, and I am the new principal at Olive Elementary School. I want to say thank you very much for having all of the principals here. It is nice to be able to let you know what we are doing at our sites. So at Olive, our school goals were created as a commitment to our students. If they invest in us, we will invest all of our available resources to them. Our first, for culture of caring, we do want to give our students a more diverse extracurricular focus, and so we have a certificated yoga instructor who comes in every week for 4 weeks for all of our TK to 5th graders. We also have in January starting our 8-week residency program with Youth and Arts, and our students are able to choose either visual or performing arts, and that is also available to all of our TK to 5th graders. And then we also have California Poetry. A poet comes to our 3rd through 5th grade students for a 10-week program, and and she gives our students some experience in poetry. For our culture of competence, we offer our reading and math intervention teachers for any students struggling in those 2 areas. We also have an intervention instructional assistant who does push-in to all of the classrooms for that. We also provide a kindergarten and 1st grade instructional assistants, 2 of them, to support our kindergarten and 1st grade classes every day for a couple hours a day in small group and one-to-one support. For culture of excellence, we also have a data specialist who works with our teachers in their twice-a-month PLCs, and that is surrounded by our ELD work that we're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's good to see you with the Farmers Market, Lori.
Oh, thank you.
All right, and I have the very high honor of presenting for Pleasant Valley tonight. As many of you know, Tony Kwan is with family, had a family emergency, and so he'll be with him. I encourage you to read through his SIPSA. I will certainly not do this justice, so you'll get a lot more details through his SIPSA. But for culture of caring, Pleasant Valley has really identified where they want to see their energy going is both in communication and really increasing the positive redirection through that PBIS, but also trauma-informed and restorative practices, which has been an ongoing practice at Pleasant Valley. And so the team has committed to that and is moving forward with those practices. For culture of competence, similar to the others that you've heard, is the development of the multi-tiered systems of support. And as you can see at Pleasant Valley, they're really putting a lens on their emerging bilingual population to make sure that all students who need extra supports have access to what they need. And then the culture of competence, certainly moving forward with the implementation of the proficiency scales through the use of the learning maps in the classroom. Like the rest of the schools, there is a data specialist that's working and an interventionist on campus to support not only the data collection, but helping and working with the staff to analyze and work through the data cycle to make sure we're monitoring progress and moving students in and out of the different tiers as needed. So with that, I'm going to move on to Rancho. Ms. Catherine.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Naum, and I'm honored to work alongside
my community at Rancho. So a lot of the things that I have are very similar to my colleagues, which is very exciting in a unified district here. And some of the things that are a little bit different when, for Rancho, when we are working on our culture of caring, one of the things we have done this year is we have restorative circles, and we've hired someone who is just supporting our restorative circles with our students. So if there are issues on the yard or things that come up, there is a whole protocol for filling out a reflection form and then meeting together, working through that, hearing everybody's voices, and then coming up with solutions together to repair that harm and move forward. Along those lines, we have developed something called the Eagle's Nest, which is supporting a place for all students to be. It is an alternative place for students to be at recess with puzzles and games and art, reading books, and it is so successful. We have to have sign-up lists rotating through. So there are certain students who get to come every day because it's the place they need, and there are other kids who get to rotate through on a weekly basis. Looking at our culture of competence, we are really leaning in this year with our universal access time and using that time to identify our students who have needs, implement that intervention, and then monitor their growth. And working in our PLCs and at staff meetings, coming together to identify across grade levels who are our kids with the highest needs and what are we going to do, how are we going to meet their needs with small groups, either push-in or working with the teacher or maybe going out to another resource person. Along those lines, we are really using the Imagine Learning platform from Galileo. They have little mini quizzes in Galileo, and then in Imagine Learning, you can make playlists that identify exactly what each student needs. So our teachers are working really closely with our assessment TOSA to put those playlists together to help the kids. And thanks to our amazing TLT team, our teacher leadership team, we're really leaning in and pushing forward with proficiency-based education and looking at the scales and the learning maps. And yesterday we had just a fabulous led professional development where we had some really good conversations together. We set some goals, and every grade level went back and made action steps on what they're going to do for their next steps. So it's hard to get everything into 1 to 2 minutes, but there's a little snapshot.
Thank you very much.
Well, there's more. Wait,
There's
how
more.
do I forward this? Enter? Okay.
You're good. San Ramon's on the screen. You're good. Kat, thanks.
Good evening again, trustees and Superintendent Derby. My name is Amanda Langford. I'm the principal of San Ramon Elementary School into my 7th year, and so I'm very pleased to be here. So at San Ramon, as you saw earlier this evening, culture of caring is our #1, and we know that if we establish strong systems in our culture of caring, then students will feel safe and they'll be ready to learn. So we are focusing on expanding our social, emotional, and behavior supports to include, to foster inclusivity. And we're doing that by explicitly teaching school-wide lessons through various programs that we're implementing, Toolbox, Perspectives, and trauma-enforced training as well. We are increasing our social emotional interventions and procedures to support behavior management and regulation, and using data to track to see how effective we are at doing so. Daily attendance and having a sense of belonging and having students having trust and clear routines are important, especially coming out of the pandemic. So secondly is our culture of caring, which is where we really try to individualize the education for all of our students and meet their needs. We've been doing this for 5 years now using MTSS system, and so we are trying to continue to create clear systems for behavior, academics, and social emotional support using the MTSS system. And we do that through universal access, where we have blocks of time for each grade level with all the support services throughout the week. And so we're working to revise and review the 3 tiers that we do have, tier 1, 2, and 3 for the supports. We are also strategically administering assessments, which connects to the data cycles and the use of our TOSA, as you've heard from my sister schools earlier, so that we can really strategically monitor student progress and ensure that they they have the right interventions, the interventions they actually need. And then last but definitely not least, culture of excellence, which is where we really dive into that rigor and relevance of the curriculum and the teacher training that we need to provide our students the best education possible. And so we are all working together to implement proficiency-based education and utilizing all of the work that the TLT has done and rolled out for our schools with the essential standards, learning maps, and proficiency skills. San Ramon 2 is focusing a little bit more on math this year after looking at some of the district-wide data in CASP and Galileo to ensure that we are really targeting those interventions and including extension activities. And last but not least, designing strong lessons and assessments to match the learning targets and learning maps that are rolling out. So thank you. And with that, last but definitely not least, Hamilton Elementary.
You bet. Steph, hi.
Good evening, trustees, Superintendent Derby. I'm Stephanie Parnell. I was the AP at Hamilton for a number of years, and now I am replacing Steve Hospodar as the principal this year. What I've noticed by listening to everybody's presentations is, and hopefully you've noticed, is our goals are very similar. Being a united district, that's awesome to see how we implement based on the needs of our community and their unique needs, but also learning from each other. So some of the things that Hamilton provides for our students in terms of culture of caring, as with the rest of us, we are expanding our social emotional supports for our students. We've really been having a focus on our mindfulness program. It's something we've been working on for the last couple of years. We do have a mindfulness instructor that goes and teaches classes within the classrooms and does mindfulness activities. We've expanded that into our middle school as well, where there is a dedicated time on Wednesdays where the students do mindfulness activities with their teachers, and then also that mindfulness instructor comes in and works with them as well. We have a trauma team at Hamilton, and they attend trainings at MCOE, and then they bring back learnings to the rest of the staff. Through them, we've implemented calming corners in our TK through 5 classrooms and calming boxes to provide students with what they need when they are experiencing high trauma. We have a reset room on campus, again, to provide students a place to go to kind of get in the right mind frame, whether it's smelling essential oils or just taking some time to reset their brains. In middle school, we have our student lounge. It's actually a student-created student lounge from our Student Advocacy Council, and that is a place for kids to go during lunchtime to provide that quiet space where they can play games or just, have activities with each other. And then we're continuing our robust restorative justice practice. We have peer court on campus through our middle school, conflict management run by students that we use for all of our younger grades as well. For our culture of competence, expanding our multi-tiered system of support, we have universal access time. We're not as far into it as some of the other schools, but taking our students and grouping them based on their needs within a grade level so they get the supports that they need. We implement data cycles, have been for a couple of years, where we're taking in data as a staff, organizing students based on their needs, using focal students so we can really give them targeted interventions, whether it's outside resources that are being brought in or within the classroom itself. We also new this year have something called RISE Readers, and that is through our foundation, RISE Scholars. And RISE Readers brings in, we have, I think, like 20 volunteers, and they come in on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and they work with our second graders to really build their confidence in reading and to push them in, because as you know, when you get into 3rd grade, you're no longer learning to read, you're reading to learn. And so it's really kind of trying to bridge that gap and push our students. It's actually really wonderful to see if anybody wants to come and watch it in progress. And then of our culture of excellence, just like we all are, big push is proficiency-based education. We too had a PD yesterday with my TLT members that did an excellent job meeting with each grade level individually for their unique needs and where they were at, and bringing that into the classroom and using the scales within the classroom. We also provided an opportunity this past summer where we paid our teachers 5 days in the elementary and 3 days in the middle school to do what we call connect the dots and really put together a curriculum map for the entire year and really tying in the social emotional learning and with all of the academics that they have. So they had a solid plan in place moving forward and how they can implement PBE moving forward as well. And then student goal setting.
Well,
that's it.
Cool. Okay. Here we go. Thank you all for the presentation. Questions from the board members? Trustee Aguilar.
Yeah, I'm just curious for all the elementary schools for the culture of caring part of it. Are you guys still doing the do good, be kind? I know that that was happening at several schools. Rancho started it. So is there
Ms. Larson, you want to organize this so we save us a little bit of switch time here?
So yes, we had quite a few schools who were a part of the Do Good, Be Kind, and you'll still see the shirts around quite a bit, but not formally, no.
Not formally.
Other questions from trustees? Trustee Butler?
I'm sorry, what was that? No.
Trustee Butler?
Can you talk about the student learning map? That was one of the things I kind of
Yeah,
highlighted
absolutely.
as I read through these.
So the third step of our process, typically PBE includes the essential standards and then a proficiency scale. And early on in the process, the teacher said, we really want a student-friendly version of this. And so they developed their own version, which is the learning maps. And so those are the versions of the proficiency scales that you've seen in some of my presentations where the standard is in the center box, and all of these substandards or standards they need to achieve to get to that center box or around the edges. And so you'll see in a lot of our classrooms, the students, that's what they have, and they kind of are coloring in or they're checking off to see where they are.
Nice.
So it's a student-friendly version. And one of the things we actually came up yesterday through the PD was we heard from several departments at both middle and high schools asking for models because they'd really like to start using something more visually appealing to the students, even in the upper grades. So we're excited to see that expand.
Trustee Mack?
Just a quick question. As we get further toward full PBE, can you characterize how the parents are adapting to it and accepting it?
Yes, I would say that I'm about 50% through every school's PTA. I think I have Linwood this week, and then I'm going to be at Sinaloa. So I'm working through. What I will say is there was a lot of misconception and misunderstanding. There's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement as I'm out there. I think the piece of it that is most it's what drew our teachers to this, that brought them to ask for this change early on, which is learning shouldn't be a mystery. It shouldn't be a surprise. And so it's PBE, while grading is an output, it's an output of everything. It's not what PBE is. PBE is a roadmap. It's simply saying, here's what you need to accomplish to be successful in this grade level or this content area, and here's the 9 things you need to do to get there. It's just having a very transparent system of what we define as success here in our schools. And so they're obviously very excited about that and seeing it develop.
Other questions? Trustee Butler?
How often do the sites look at data? Is there a cycle that they're?
We recommend that cycles are about 6 to 8 weeks long, but it really depends. And you'll hear almost all of our schools brought up their SST or their data cycles. So having that data specialist on site who's working directly with the principals and with the staff, they're determining what each student needs. You guys could answer better than me kind of what those cycles are looking like right now. Typically 6 to 8 weeks.
They don't want to talk anymore.
They're tired.
They're dead.
Other questions? If not, what's before us is a recommendation by the superintendent and staff to approval of the 2021 single plan for student achievement for the elementary schools.
That's correct.
Yep. So if I would have a motion to that effect. Moved by Trustee Gaston, seconded by Trustee Butler. And our student trustee is headed home to get her homework done. With that, if there's no other conversation, I'll ask for a vote. 7 trustees in favor, none opposed. Dr. Derby and Superintendent Larson, thank you very much for the presentation.
Superintendent Larson, would you change seats with me?
Yeah,
No,
so
I'm
I
good,
do have
I'm
one-
good, thanks.
Before everybody walks out of the room, I have a question. Do we know the current status of the approval of vaccinations for 5 through 11?
Not yet.
Not yet. We don't.
We're
We haven't.
getting closer.
We're getting closer. That's all we know. Okay.
I just want to thank all of you. You were fabulous. The unification of what you're doing together and following the goals that are set by the board and by the district it's very impressive, and I want you to know that. I very much appreciate all of you. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you so much for staying late and keeping us company in this wonderful place. I have one more item before us this evening. Approval of declaration of need for fully qualified educators.
Right.
Brankovich?
And I'm last again.
You know, but,
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
been that kind of night. No, this is simply a correction. When this was originally submitted to CTC, the page that lists, page 3, that lists the authorizations for single subject permits, all of those subject areas were left off. So it's not a big deal. The documentation started to come back, and Michelle Gassner's going, what's going on here? And we finally found out that that had been omitted when submitted. So it's not a major deal, but you guys had to approve it again.
Okay, so with that, I'm Diane Gasson. A move approved. Second by trustee Mack. All in favor, 7 trustees in favor, none opposed. But you're, you know, we're gonna start moving you up in the batting order. This is,
I
you're
don't know,
fast.
maybe, I think it's you guys saved me for the last, because you know I just don't have a whole lot to say about it. It's just, move on.
Okay, I believe that takes us to the end of our agenda for this evening. With that, we are adjourned.